indigenous people from these lands. UT Dallas continues to benefit from the contributions of indigenous students and employees on our campus, and we are committed to ongoing support for Native culture that is essential to our community. For more information, please visit the Multicultural Center website on the Land Acknowledgement page. Good morning, once again. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Bruce August Jr., and I'm happy to welcome you here today for our program. Today, we will have discussions centered around mental health and well-being, a part of the equity equation. To start off, allow me to introduce Dr. Pearson. Dr. Yvette E. Pearson is the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at the University of Texas at Dallas. A fellow of the American Society of Civil Engineers, or ASCE, she is recognized globally for over 25 years in higher education, particularly for her work to advance sustainability, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. Her efforts have led to over $30 million in funding for initiatives to support DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, in STEM, and changes to policies and practices of global engineering organizations. Among her awards and honors are ABET's Claire L. Felbinger Award for Diversity and Inclusion, the ASCE's Professional Practice Ethics and Leadership Award, the University of Texas Regents Outstanding Teacher Award, the Society of Women Engineers Distinguished Engineering Educator Award, ASCE's President's Medal. Dr. Pearson is a registered professional engineer, a commissioner on ABET's Engineering Accreditation Commission, that's a mouthful, and a host of Engineering Change podcasts, which has audiences in over 70 countries on 6 continents. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Yvette Pearson.
Thank you, Bruce, and good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Can we get a little bit more than that? Good morning. Is everybody kind of adjusting to the weather? And are you ready for it to be 80 degrees tomorrow? Well, I really just want to take a few minutes to thank you for joining us here today to discuss this very important topic of mental health and well-being. I think if I asked for a show of hands, I doubt that there would not be anyone who would not be able to raise their hands to share that they have been impacted or someone they love has been impacted by mental health challenges and mental health crises in some cases, especially as we still navigate COVID and so much else going on in the world. I know personally, I've been impacted in a number of ways, from diagnoses and people having to be hospitalized in my family, to brushes with suicide myself, to friends and family members who continue to struggle with mental health challenges that manifest in a number of different ways. And so I'm really happy that our team, led by Rosie Peterson, our Director of Employee Equity Initiatives, and Carrie Tate, our Director of our Accessibility Resource Center, along with their amazing team, our Universal Access ERG, and our partners in student health and wellness, and all of the partners that are listed on the back of the program. I can't name them all by heart, but we really appreciate you coming together to bring awareness to this very important issue on our campus and in our community, and that we have our Mayor Velka, here to share with us and to be a part of this, because it really is not something that's isolated. It's not something that we can deal with in silos and on islands by ourselves. We need each other. So we need each other for support, emotionally, physically. We need each other for support policy-wise, with caregiving and so many other ways. And so I'm happy that we have this opportunity to build community. So with that, I'll say again, thank you to our organizers, Jasmine Johnson, who's running around somewhere, and all of our student workers for bringing this together. Thank you to our sponsors and our partners. And with that, I'll ask you to please help me welcome Dr. Jonathan Hartman to the stage. He's a lecturer in our Arts, Humanities, and Technology School.
Thank you, Dr. Pearson. All right. I was a relatively new faculty member at UT Dallas in the spring of 2020 when everything changed. Educators and students face new challenges, both at the university and in their personal lives. I struggled with the new communications avenues and making sense of the virtual contributions of my students. For students and faculty requesting accommodation, quarantine was difficult. It added a physical barrier to the psychological ones we already face. As an educator navigating my own mental health issues, I found it hard to ask for help. I constantly deny that I need this. And I resisted disclosing a disability all throughout graduate school and then into my teaching. But fortunately, with the aid of the Universal Access Employee Resource Group, I've spoken to my supervisors and I've received accommodation that's made my job easier. It my work run more smoothly. Created in 2019, Universal Access is a community of staff and faculty. We strive to make UTD a welcoming place for people with disabilities. That includes ourselves, our colleagues, students, and we do this through advocacy and education. We bring attention to the needs of people with disabilities. We share what we learn through our own experience, and we invite teachers, researchers, students, and local nonprofits to share their insights with the UTD community. That's through our regular meetings and events like the one we're all here at today. I invite you all to join us. So you can learn more at Universal Access, let's abbreviate that. You can learn more at uaerg.utdallas.edu. Next, please allow me to introduce our very special guest, Paul Volcker, Mayor of Richardson. Paul Volcker was appointed to serve as mayor of the City Council in May of 2015. He was elected mayor in May of 2017, re-elected in 2019 and 2021, and has served on City Council since 2013. As official head of government, he's the presiding officer, votes on all matters coming before council, and represents the city during all ceremonial occasions. Please give a warm welcome to Paul Volcker.
Well, thank you very much. I think I recognize that from our website. It has been my honor to serve as the mayor of Richardson for 8 years. And it's always a pleasure to be at UT Dallas in Richardson to have any kind of an activity. It's an amazing story that we have here. I moved to Richardson in '83, right out of college from the Midwest. I remember what this place looked like back in 1983. It has turned into, it's blossomed into an absolutely beautiful place. Beauty is an important thing. I've been on council for 10 years. I tell people the most important vote I've ever done and will ever do was acquiring the Spring Creek Nature Area. It is impactful in so many ways. We talked about indigenous people. When we purchased that land, which was going to be 2,400 apartments, the city decided we'd step up and say, no, this is virgin hardwood forest, we need to keep this. We had to survey it. We found several encampments that were over 3,500 years old. So people have been calling Richardson home for much longer than anyone might think. And that area is absolutely one of the best mental health things you can do, is take a walk through that nature area. But I can promise you there's not a mayor in this country that is not concerned about mental health. From every aspect, I deal with this from a public safety standpoint. I'm very, very proud of the relationship between our police department and the Methodist health system. We created tiger teams of therapists and police that work together so that mental health is not viewed as a criminal activity, so that we can work with the mental health providers and other county, state, and federal programs that can help really turn the direction of one's life around. And it starts oftentimes, and unfortunately, with an interaction with a police officer. So how that interaction happens, how it's handled, how it's monitored, how it's reported, all those things are extremely important. And we could not have done it without partnering in a public-private relationship like we've done. I think of UT Dallas on a personal note. I have an adult son who's autistic. We've been going to the Collier Center and other activities here at the university since he was 5 years old. That level of understanding and treatment research that happens here is a game changer for so many, and I'm so proud that it happens right here in my city. I've partnered, half of this room sits on one of my committees for diversity and inclusion, so I feel like I know most of you, and I truly appreciate, the DEI program here has been a role model for other institutions, especially the independent school districts, cities, other universities. So thank you so much if you're part of that program here and what you do. It's a game changer in how we all look at each other. When I was appointed mayor, they kind of asked me, and I kind of thought about it. And it's amazing, the very first thing that went through my head when they said, you're gonna be the mayor, and I'm like, well, maybe. I knew that there was a little thing called State of the City. I understand the State of the University was done yesterday, so I was told I got a picture in there, thank you, around the DEI aspects. But I'm dyslexic. So one of the very first things I thought about was, oh my God, I'm going to have to stand in front of 400 people and give a 50-minute speech on a teleprompter. For someone who's dyslexic, that at least makes you think about, do I really want to do that? You talk about accommodations, right? My communications staff were godsends. They sit with me, they understand my trigger issues, complexity of words, how to write sentences, where another mayor may have practiced twice, I practiced 7 times, right? But I got through it with their help and with the support of the community. And one of the, obviously I'm not just in a group like this, I'm pretty open about, dyslexia. And I've always appreciated being invited to different ISDs to go to their programs that they offer and talk about overcoming, understanding, and dealing with different levels of disabilities or situations that any of us face. And it's always the parents that come up to me afterwards that say, wow, thank you for sharing that with us. Because it's important to be open and honest with ourselves and others about situations. Because while I may not be able to walk a mile in your shoes, I want to hear your story about that journey. And so that's what today's about. Thank you for inviting me. And, this university is something special to me, so thank you.
you, Mr. Velker. So, with that, it's going to be hard to follow, but we have a dynamic speaker next. And so our first keynote speaker is Kim Williams. Kim Williams is a healthcare executive with more than 25 years of experience in healthcare marketing, communications, sales, and community engagement. Kim is also a mental health advocate, ally, speaker, and panelist whose passion is to open the door for the hard conversations around mental health and close the door on stigmas. She serves as a NAMI peer-to-peer leader. I hope you all got to visit NAMI outside, and is a trained Stephen minister. Please give a warm welcome to Kim Williams.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? I can hear myself. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Rosie. Thank you for the team. I am so honored to be here today. This is such a wonderful conversation. And to the mayor who just spoke, I couldn't be more proud of an opportunity to be open and honest about my life. And so thank you for having me here today. I want to talk a little bit about celebrities. So do you guys keep in touch with the celebrities? Do you keep up to date with your celebrity news? Who's dating whom? Who's marrying whom? Or the athletes? Or am I the only one who kind of keeps up with celebrity news? Maybe. There's a few of you. Okay, that's good. That's good. You know, there's some celebrities that I've been thinking about. Robin Williams, Pete Davidson, Serena Williams, and Naomi Judd. You guys know what those four individuals have in common? Anyone want to shout it out? Mental health, yeah. And despite their fame and fortune and all of the resources that they had, they still struggled with their mental health. Why is it that we have lived in a society for so long where celebrity news, who's wearing whom, who's dating whom, who's getting married, is more important than us talking about mental health? I'm Kim Williams. I am someone who has lived mental health experience, and I'm here to have the conversation. But I don't know how to change my slides. Thank you. I just realized that. Okay. So I'm ready to have the conversation. You know, you guys have been in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space for a while, it sounds like. I will tell you, in the corporate world, we've really started being involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations just in the last couple of years. Embarrassed to say, but it is true. It's what I have found. And in the diversity and equity and inclusion space, we've talked a lot about language, right? Language, words. What do we say? Well, I want to talk to you today about some labels, because these are some labels that I have heard that just make me cringe. And I want us to look at them. How many of you have heard the words psycho? Oh, she's psycho. Or schizo. Or a head case. Now this one kind of seems a little, maybe not too bad, but drama queen. Still a label. Bipolar. Crazy. I too find myself sometimes using that word crazy when I'm having someone who's wanting a project done by the end of Friday, and I can think, they must be crazy, they want me to get this done. But I have learned, because I have labeled myself, and I have a label, to be more careful about my vocabulary. And that's one of the things that I want to talk to you about today. I know a few things about labeling. My story, I was a moody teenage girl, but what teenage girl isn't moody, right? I mean, we find them to be moody. But I went away to college. Well, I didn't go away to one college. I went away to 3 different colleges because, I thought relocation would make things better, right? Ended up at Texas A&M University. And I was either the life of the party and had so much fun and could wear everybody out because we would go from one party to another and I'd get more friends and I'd do this, or I would be home and nobody would see me because I would be depressed. I would be sad and had these mood swings. And I didn't know that everyone else didn't have a lot of energy and wasn't working 3 jobs or having these jagged crying spells. I didn't know that because I was in college. I was away from family. I just thought that this was a normal experience, right? So you fast forward into my life and I get married a year after I graduate. Well, it's a little different when you're living with someone full time, right? Because you've got somebody who can kind of see what's going on in your life. And I hadn't been married very long, and my husband at the time said to me, I think we have a problem. I think you've got a problem. I think you need to see someone. And so I did. I went and saw a therapist in College Station where we were living. And I got diagnosed, but I got misdiagnosed. And that led to 7 years of complete chaos and confusion in my life. Because you see, I had been diagnosed with depression. And so what do they give you? And what do they give you back in the early 1990s for depression are antidepressants. Well, antidepressants don't work really well for a person when you have bipolar disorder. And so that's why I had so many years of chaos and confusion and trying to go to different therapists and firing those therapists and going to a new psychiatrist. It was a very challenging time. And why was that? In the 90s, in 2000s, and I think even now here, I know our next speaker is going to talk about this, we've had stigma around mental health. And the one good thing that I can say about the pandemic is that we are having the conversations about mental health. We are being forced to. Our government officials are having to really look at the issue. In corporations, we're looking at the issue as well. In universities, how can we help support one another? And so I'm so grateful today that we're able to have that conversation. So I want to talk just a little bit. I just have a couple of minutes. I want to talk about this. So everybody here get your physical exam every year? If you don't, that's really important. You see this green folder? This is your physical checkup. We talk about that, right? Oh, Rosie, did you go? How's your blood pressure doing? Or did you get your annual well woman or your mammogram visit? We talk about that, right? Because that's acceptable. But do we talk about a mental health check-in every year? We don't, or we haven't. I'm doing it more and more every time I speak, and every time I meet people, people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, thank you so much for having the conversation. My family member or myself or someone else has struggled. And it's so important for us to have the conversation around physical health and mental health, because I will tell you personally, without my physical health, if I'm not physically healthy, I don't have my mental health. And if my mental health isn't in a good spot, I don't have my physical health. They are all integrated. And I was so excited. A couple of weeks ago, I was speaking with an insurance company and with HR executives. And the day that I spoke was the day that the White House had come out, and the advisory council had come out and said, we need to not only have physical checkups, but from now on, we need our physicians to check up on people's mental health and anxiety levels and depression levels from the age of 18 to 64, I think it was, or 65. I'm not quite sure why that age. I'll be doing some research into that. But at least we're having the conversation, right? At least we are going to be checking in with one another. So I want to share with you today a couple of things that are in my toolbox that are very important. Does anyone remember stranger danger when you were a kid? Did your parents teach you about that? Okay, so in my family, I had two people that my mother said could pick me up from school, elementary school. It was Lee Dale was one, and Susan was the other. The other people that maybe tried to pick me up were strangers, and that was dangerous, and I wasn't to get in the car with them. Why do I bring that up? Because I'm going to ask you right now to think about two people in your life that if you were to have a crisis, a mental health crisis, and mental health crisis can happen from situations. I have been in some terrible situations just in my profession that have exposed me to trauma. So it was situational. It could be environmental. It could be like me where I also have a biological history and propensity to have bipolar disorder. But I want you to think of two people that you think that you could contact if you were having a mental health crisis. And then I want you to think about this. Do you have those two people, and have you told them that they're your two people? It's important for us to have two people. And sometimes the two people that you have in your safe people toolbox may not be the person that you would call if you broke a leg or if you had a heart attack, because it's different, right? So that's so important. The other thing that I found important in my life is the employee assistance program. I was going through a divorce, a very difficult time in 1997, was working for an organization, and I actually had a boss who said to me, I'm concerned about you. And we have an employee assistance program, and I'd like for you to consider calling them. And I'm so incredibly grateful that she was willing to do that. What I have found in organizations when it comes to the employee assistance program is that usually the HRVPs know about the employee assistant programs, the mid-level managers may know about it, but the executives and the frontline workers don't know about it. So we've got to get really good at saying, here's what our benefits are. Or if you've got benefits through the university, here are what our benefits are. We should all know what our benefits are and where our resources are. The other thing that I like to say is workplace support buddy. I've created a program at my work where I have a workplace support buddy person. I can tell her, I'm not doing well today. Because what do we all say when I say, well, how are you doing today? Just fine. I'm just fine. And that's okay to be saying that to everyone else, but I have one person that I can say, I'm not fine. And I find that so important to have. The other things are just more personal things that I have found have worked for me really well. Because I have bipolar disorder, sleep is my friend. And if I do not have sleep, I am not nice. And I wish I could say that was different, but it's not. It just is what it is. And I used to take a physician out to speak at corporations, and he would talk about sleep hygiene. Has anyone ever heard that before, sleep hygiene? And let's think about that. Why is it that we have a routine for our kids, right? Little kids, we bathe them, we give them a snack, they're in their PJs, we put them in their bed, we tuck them in, we read them a story. It's hygiene, right? It's how they're taking care of their sleep. How many of you are like me where sometimes you're like, let me just check my messages one more time. Check my email one more time. That's not sleep hygiene. I can tell you that. The others, exercising, we all know that. Thank you so much for telling us to go on a walk today, Mayor. We definitely should together and go on a walk. Meditation and breathing, I find that to be so important. How many of you are holding your breath right now? Think about it. Are you holding your breath right now? Yeah? Yeah. So let's do something. I'm going to count to 4, and you're going to take a deep breath in. I'm going to count to 4, and you're going to hold that deep breath, and then I'll do another 4, and you can exhale. Okay? So let's inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold, 3, 2, 1, and exhale, 4, 3, 2, and 1. It's that simple. And when we are in a stressful situation or when we are in a crisis, we tend to hold our breath. And at work, we tend to hold our breath. And I see this especially in the healthcare workers. And I encourage them, especially the nurses, go to the corner of the room and breathe. Take a deep breath. There are those of us who have to take medications, and then hobbies and downtime are so important as well. I want to leave you with a couple of resources. I'm so happy to see NAMI here today. NAMI has a great resource website. They have wonderful programs, peer-to-peer, family-to-family, in your own voice. Really would like to encourage you to look into that. Mental Health America and Walgreens have come together to implement a program as well. And then the National Suicide Prevention Line. How many of you know that it's now 988? 988. Please, please put 988 into your phone now, if you have an opportunity. I want to ask you a quick question. If I can get it. Maybe I don't. Here's my question. What will you do after today? I'm speaking, you've heard the mayor speak, we have another fabulous keynote speaker, and then there's going to be panelists here. As you walk away from today, here are my questions. What will you stop doing because of what you've learned today? What will you continue doing, something maybe that you have been doing for a long time that has been helpful? And the last one is the green. This is like a stoplight. What will you start doing? Will you start having more conversations with people? I hope that that is what you will do. My name is Kim Williams. I'm a mental health advocate, ally, and speaker, and I am speaking from experience. Thank you for letting me speak with you today.
We can do better than that. Let's give her another round of applause. Thank you, Kim. That was excellent. So, we have another fabulous keynote speaker. Her name is Dr. Erin Schrader. Dr. Schrader is a staff psychologist here at the UT Dallas Student Counseling Center, where she serves as the assistant director and the training director. Dr. Schrader earned her MA, Master of Arts, and PhD in counseling psychology from Texas Women's University in Denton. She completed her postdoctoral residency at Texas Women's University Counseling and Psychological Services and has worked at the UT Dallas Student Counseling Center since 2015. Dr. Schrader is a disabled psychologist and is passionate about disability identity and creating accessible and affirming spaces for disabled individuals, particularly within mental health and university settings. Her professional interests also include neurodiversity, LGBTQ+, advocacy, and gender-affirming care, social justice and equity in mental health, and supervision and training. Dr. Schrader's talk will be about reducing stigma related to disability and mental health concerns and encouraging a shared responsibility as a community to create accessible and inclusive spaces. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Erin Schrader.
As as I'm getting settled, are folks able to hear me? Is this accessible? I'm happy to put on, always happy to put on the lapel mic if that would be more accessible. But for my own access needs, I'm gonna sit during my portion of the chat. Okay, let me get this a little closer. How's this sounding? Okay, wonderful. Please let someone know if at any point it'd be more helpful for me to have the lapel mic on. So, hi y'all, I'm Erin Schrader. I'm a staff psychologist. Oh, I need to remember there's a PowerPoint. I'm a staff psychologist at the Student Counseling Center. So I've worked at UT Dallas in several roles over the years. So I first was here as a practicum therapist in 2008 until 2009, and then I circled back to be a doctoral intern in 2013, and then I made my way back again to become a permanent staff member in 2015. And I share that because I do want to name that UTD has had a pretty special place in my heart for like a big portion of my life. It's a place where I've been able to work with some really incredible colleagues and support some really amazing students, and that has been such a joy. And it has also been a place where I've been really encouraged to explore more what it means for me to be a disabled woman and to navigate what is it like to work as a physically disabled psychologist, and what does that mean to me. And there's been a lot of growth that I've experienced in this over the years. In recognizing where are places that I need to self-advocate and trying to become more comfortable with the idea that it is absolutely reasonable to ask for access. It is absolutely reasonable to expect accommodations, and trying to be unapologetic about sharing access needs, and really trying to notice if I instinctively say, like, I'm so sorry, I just need us to slow down while we're walking together. Or, I'm so sorry, I really need a fan in this space. I almost apologized for sitting up here during this conversation. That's like literally what this conversation is about accessibility. So I had to remind myself not to apologize as I sat down up here, because I need to. And so that's really been a journey, and obviously up until this very moment is still a journey for me, and something I'm really working on to intentionally challenge messages that I got growing up my whole life around what does it mean to be a disabled person or take up space as a disabled person. I really had to challenge my own internalized ableism, and really had to grow in my resolve that it is critical to have voices and spaces, which has been so cool to share space with y'all today, for folks who are passionately advocating for more transparent, more open conversations about disability. And so in doing so, I've developed quite a bit of personal and professional passion, like related to disability identity and accessibility. So I really like having these conversations. So I feel joyful about us being here today. So in working here, I've also had a lot of opportunity to work like with others, like some faces I see out here today who are also passionate about accessibility and universal design. And that's been really exciting and important for me to be able to connect with other people around this. Because objectively, there are so many barriers that disabled individuals navigate day in and day out on a daily basis. And those barriers, some are physical, they're not all physical. It may be the elevator that is broken down again for the 10th time, or not being able to find accessible parking spaces that feel close, or maybe it's spaces that you unexpectedly find are overwhelmingly bright or loud, or too stimulating from a sensory perspective. And it also can be much larger systemic barriers as you're navigating inaccessibility in the workplace, or discrimination during a job interview, or just come across policies, like maybe where you work, that just feel pretty inherently ableist. And so pervasive social stigma related to disability is also a barrier. Feeling isolated, feeling othered or excluded from inaccessible events, those are barriers. So I'm so glad that there's been mention, I think several times already, around stigma, because the impact of stigma related to disability is really real and really important to discuss. The messaging that some folks receive that their access needs are a burden, whether it's direct messages someone receives, their access needs or their disability is a burden, in some way, or maybe it's just like messages we receive out in the world. So, I mean, I was flying a couple weeks ago, which flying, folks may know that flying in and of itself can be, I already see head shakes, can be super, super inaccessible. And indeed it was. And so as I'm trying to leave the airport, you must get up one floor to be able just to exit to the building and get into the parking lot. Inexplicably, every elevator was broken. Every elevator was broken. And there was one, or every escalator was broken. There was one elevator for like 1,000 people, and everyone's got 100 bags. And so you can just see this hour-long standing line of folks needing to get out of the building, but there was no one around acknowledging, like, this is probably a crisis for some folks, or no signs, no directions around what to do, just sort of like good luck to you as you try to find a way to get out of this building. And I was super stuck for a while, for over an hour, just trying to get out. And that was a message, that was a message that got internalized for me of your access needs are an afterthought in this moment. And those internalized messages, those have an impact on our emotional well-being and our mental health and the mental health of the students and staff and faculty here. I can't tell you the number of students I've worked with over the years who have shared they feel like they're a burden when they share their access needs with others. And that's just a common theme, and maybe not for everyone, but for a lot of folks within the disabled community, feeling impacted by a message that we're all just individually responsible for managing our own disabilities and finding ways to advocate for our own access. And self-advocacy is absolutely important. I think an important theme at the summit and other spaces I've been in. I'm a big proponent with the students I work with of talking about how can we be really powerful advocates for ourselves. So absolutely, that is important. And also, I think a big part of how we help folks to feel empowered to self-advocate is also, on the other end, we have to be simultaneously working to dismantle ableism and barriers and advocating for more universal design and creating more accessible and thoughtful spaces that are inclusive for folks on the front end, because that will help, that will allow disabled individuals to not have to carry the burden of always being the one to have to self-advocate. It's not you every time that has to do it. And we want to set it up so when folks do self-advocate, they're met with a positive response. And it feels like it goes well, and folks are really responsive to that. And that helps to reinforce self-advocacy and helps you to leave that situation or conversation believing like, oh yeah, great, I want to do this again. That felt really successful. Because I know for me, whenever I'm asked proactively if I have any access needs, like I was for this summit, or when someone decides to ride along with me in the elevator, because that is my only option. When someone slowly, if they slow their pace slightly when they're walking next to me so that we can walk side by side, actually, I feel more included in that moment. I feel like less of a burden. And that has an inevitable impact on my mental health. So there is messages of, you are desired in this space. You absolutely should be included in this space. I have a responsibility to ensure you're included. Those impact my mental health. Those reinforce my desire to self-advocate. And I think mental health is a really critical part of this conversation when we're thinking about equity and inclusion and disability, because there may be aspects of one's disability that are inherently challenging and create stress for many folks, and mental health concerns in and of themselves may also be a disability. And for many individuals, it may be, to a degree, or even more so, maybe it's the ableism or the stigma or the barriers or the marginalization that they're coming up against. Maybe that's what's having a really significant impact on their mental health and feelings of overall well-being, potentially more so than the disability itself did. And so per the CDC, adults with disabilities report experiencing frequent mental distress, almost 5 times as much as adults without disabilities. But symptoms related to mental health issues are often overlooked quite a bit, or they're often lumped in to the disability itself, or assumed that's just your disability. So, oh, you didn't get out of bed for the last 5 days and you just felt unbelievably fatigued. That's just part of your disability. That's just part of your chronic pain, versus doing more of an assessment for depression and for other things that may be separate from the disability. sometimes disability or mental health symptoms may really be minimized as something that should just be powered through, or maybe it's just assumed that because someone is disabled, that's just inherent, that they would also experience depression, or you'll experience anxiety. That's just part of the deal, right? And so really minimized in that way. So just like there has historically been with disability identity, there's also so much stigma related to mental health concerns as well. And the messages, like I was talking about the messages I've received related to my disability, the messages we receive related to mental health are also deeply impactful. They shape how we feel about ourselves. They shape how we address, or maybe don't address, our mental health concerns. And so messages like, we should just power through when we're feeling depressed, or messages like, are you maybe making those symptoms up? Maybe you're exaggerating it a little bit, or it's not as much as bad as you thought it was. Messages like, everything's going so well for you. You have so much that's going good in your life. Like, what is there to be sad or to be anxious about? These are common messages. This is not something I'm just pulling out of thin air. This is what I hear every day in the students that I meet with, every day. These are messages that folks receive all the time, directly or indirectly, and those also get internalized in some way. And that's so harmful and so concerning, because in the same way that I would really wish and want for everyone to be feeling empowered to advocate for their access needs, I'd also want everyone to feel so empowered and so invited to be advocating for their mental health related needs and to seek support and resources anytime you feel like you have a need. So I think a big part of pushing back against the potential harmful messages many have received is being intentional to reduce stigma, both as it relates to disability community and also to mental health. And so destigmatizing disability is to remember the disabled community exists, right? Too often, I think disabled folks in that community kind of forgotten about during conversations or until maybe a specific access need is brought up and kind of pulls it back into the radar. Just thinking about that on the front end. Destigmatizing is to include disability when we're thinking about identity and equity and inclusion. Destigmatizing would be as new spaces are created on campuses, as events are being hosted, as you're leading or facilitating a class. It's thinking about proactively, how could these spaces, how could these events be structured in a way that allows as much participation as possible and holds disability and neurodiversity and diverse ways of learning and communicating in mind. And not from a lens of, we have to make this accessible, but because we're required to, but because we deeply believe that our spaces and our community are made richer by diversity of identity, including disability. So destigmatizing could look like making notes on emails. You have an upcoming event or an interview with a job applicant. You're meeting with your students for the first time. It's someone's first day here at work, and you make a note in all of your correspondence to them that says access needs and accessibility of whatever this is, X, Y, and Z, is deeply important to me. I invite you to share if you have any access needs, and would love to talk about that more. And we don't just send that on the email to folks who we maybe visually assessed or kind of wonder, could there be access needs here? It's to everyone. That we're not making assumptions about this. We're just putting out the invitation, because that makes the invitation clear, and it makes it clear that accessibility is a value of yours right out the gate. So folks might feel safer to advocate for themselves. I cannot tell you the sheer number of times I have met with someone in a lot of different roles that I'm in, whether a trainee or client, student, a lot of different things, who have said, I wouldn't have brought this up, I wouldn't have shared that X, Y, and Z would have made the space more accessible to me, but now that you ask, now that we're talking about it, yeah, please turn off the lights, please do this thing. And I'm so glad that I brought it up. But often I hear folks say, but I would not have mentioned it. I would not have wanted to be a burden. So we're saying it on the front end. Destigmatization would be viewing accommodations and access needs as critical for inclusion versus some kind of unfair advantage that folks are getting. Destigmatizing mental health concerns would be just challenging ourselves to talk openly about mental health. Perhaps we're sharing our own experiences of anxiety with other people, or we're normalizing how common mental health concerns are. Destigmatization is if someone comes to us and says, I'm feeling so overwhelmed, or I'm having panic attacks, I'm feeling like incredibly depressed. We say things like, I'm so glad you shared this with me. This is really, really, really common. How can I support you? What would be next steps? We normalize it. We let them know we're here for them. Destigmatization is showing compassion for students or colleagues when they're navigating mental health concerns and being flexible with others and our expectations or our deadlines or our timelines. It is holding the same compassion for mental health concerns as we do for physical illness and injury, and holding the same compassion and value around mental health days as we do sick days, and really seeing those as valuable. I see a lot of nods to that one. Good. I mean, I hope that we're really thinking about this, of the importance of mental health days. Oh, thank you. So I am excited, that we'll shift into the Q&A panel soon, because we'll be able to hear, I hope, some innovative ideas and conversation regarding ways to expand access and further create a community of disability inclusion at UTD. And one way that we do that is by familiarizing ourselves with the resources that we even have at UTD. And so I was asked to mention just a few of them in my chat with you. So this is not an exhaustive list. I'm just mentioning a few things. So Terry now is the Accessibility Resource Center, yes. Am I right in correct in the change in name? But if you haven't checked it out, Accessibility Resource Center, formerly OSA, has updated their website. It has a lot of amazing resources on there. I was just perusing it recently, and it looked awesome, and had a lot on there. Not just info for students who are seeking accommodations, but also resources on adaptive language and or inclusive language and adaptive technology and things like that. So there's a lot to peruse. Also wanted to name the UTD accessibility page. So there's a lot of resources if you want to get in contact with the ADA coordinator or the Report a Barrier link. And I did want to name that because I think a lot of folks have never heard of the Report a Barrier link. So that is the link you could go to if you want to share something that's not working on campus, like you hit an automatic door opener and it doesn't open, or it opens 20 degrees. I think is what I've seen. It opens just about this much, then that would be a place you could go share specifically where is it on campus. Or if you were at an event and there were videos but there were no captions, that would have been really helpful. Or an event where you think, there could have been some more thoughtfulness about sensory sensitivity at this event. That really would have helped me to feel more included in the space. Or if you just did something happened, you attended a space on campus and felt excluded or othered in some way related to being disabled, this would be a place you could go share about that. And we all have a responsibility to make those reports. So even if the door opener is not impacting me directly personally on that day, I'm still going to make that report every time. I'm still going to want to share because I know it's impacting many other folks. I want to have a sense of urgency and immediacy around that. There is a campus accessibility committee. Folks haven't heard, and so there's an address for that, but certainly could, if you wanted to email suggestions or concerns about accessibility of campus, that would be a place you could go. Of course, I'm going to plug the Student Counseling Center just because I'm from the Student Counseling Center, and so just want to share that there is a lot of opportunity to address a range of mental health concerns, and we care so deeply about the diverse identities of students. We want our services to be as accessible as possible, and certainly along the way, if you ever have feedback for us or have heard feedback around ways to make our mental health services, the Counseling Center, more accessible, more inclusive, please let us know. We'd be so open to that feedback and would want that. And part of our efforts to try to continue to destigmatize mental health as we've expanded our comment chats, which are real brief 15 or 20 minute drop-in appointments that students can come to if they just want to learn more about mental health or to learn about what would it even mean to set up an appointment. And we also have a number of identity-based ones, and so I offer ones on Fridays that are focused on disability identity and access. So if a student wanted just to come chat with me about disability-related things, or an event about an access barrier they ran into, or what's it like to navigate college alongside chronic pain, would be happy to meet with them and love. So just wanted folks to know that's a resource. And one non-UTD resource I wanted to share is Disability Visibility Project. And so I see some like yeses for that. Created by Alice Wong, who's a disability activist. There is a lot of social media for it, but just go to their website as well. It's super focused on intersectionality, and there's like 100 podcasts. It is a really great resource if you just wanted to do a deep dive and learn more about disability, and especially as it intersects with a lot of other identities as well. Just love that resource, and I think that's a really good starting point if you just want to learn more and feel inspired from today. So in closing, I just wanted to say, I'm so glad we have summits like this, that we're able to highlight experiences of, disabled individuals and highlight conversations around like, universal design and advocacy. I hope, at the individual level that, disabled individuals, these conversations, like for them, that it highlights the idea it is reasonable to expect accessibility. It is important for our overall mental health. We are not a burden. And it is reasonable and important to expect the best for our mental health. It's reasonable to seek out resources and support whenever we can. I think these conversations also challenge us as a broader community to hold a shared responsibility to create spaces to be as inclusive and accessible as possible, and for us to be immediately responsive when we realize, okay, that event was not as accessible as I thought it was, or there is a way I could better have met that access need for someone. It challenges us, I think, to be immediately responsive when we recognize our own biases and our own ableism, because that's there. And so let's really try to challenge it and dismantle it. I think these conversations call for us to create a culture of disability inclusion in the workplace, so it's clear that we hold this genuine desire to create environments where there's an open invitation for anyone who we work with or teach or interact with, or who we might interact with in the future, invite them to share their access needs. So my hope and wish in these conversations today at the summit is we leave maybe feeling inspired to explore some new and innovative ways to create more accessible and inclusive spaces, and try to really destigmatize conversations related to disability and mental health. And so I just really appreciate y'all for showing up here today and wanting to have conversations like this with us.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Schrader. You may stay right where you're at as I call the rest of our panelists to the stage. We appreciate all that wonderful information and knowledge that we all should have. So, for our panel discussion for the rest of our program, we have an additional 4 great speakers lined up. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one. So, Casey Siebenegger is a Master Certified Health Education Specialist. She works at the Student Wellness Center here at UT Dallas and has worked there for 12 years and has served 6 years as its director. Casey began incorporating mental health education and prevention programming, services, and marketing into the Student Wellness Center's services in 2010. She has been a certified suicide prevention instructor through the QPR Institute for 11 years, which I hope you all get trained in, and has recently become ASSIST trained, and ASSIST stands for Applied Suicide Intervention Skills Training, and obtained the College and University Suicide Prevention Accreditation through the American Association of Suicidality in 2021. Casey continues to assess emerging trends among college students in the U.S. related to mental health with the goal to reduce the impact that mental health has among UT Dallas students currently and in the future. Thank you, Casey. Give her a hand. My friend Siri Wilder is a doctoral student in the psychology program at UT Dallas. She works in the Couples Daily Lives Lab, led by Dr. Karen Prager. Siri received her bachelor's degrees in psychology and English from Whittier College in 2017 and spent 2 years working as a research associate in social services prior to attending UT Dallas. In addition to her research in social services prior to attending UT Dallas, in addition to her research on couples post-conflict recovery and reconciliation, she has enjoyed teaching human sexuality and working on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in her committee roles. Siri Wilder. Dylan M. Rafferty is a navigator, influencer, and disability rights activist committed to serving all people with disabilities in the cross-disability community. He is a transformational leader, social entrepreneur, author, startup executive who works across multiple industries and sectors in the United States and parts of the world to bridge alliances and collaborative partnerships. Dylan serves on many executive boards, including serving as vice chair of the Texas Governor's Committee for People with Disabilities and as director of the United States International Council on Disabilities. Dylan? Connie Mirza is a first-generation Kurdish American undergraduate student pursuing a double major degree in both psychology and child learning and development. She is the vice president of the Student Diversity Advisory Council, a research assistant in the Healthy Development Project led by Dr. Shayla Haloub, and a program facilitator volunteer for the Center of Children and Families Learning Program called Play With Me. In her free time, Connie enjoys to intern and clinically shadow both a child and adolescent psychiatrist and interventional cardiologist. That's a mouthful. She is interested to research the mental and public health consequences that genocide have on subsequent generations through the transmission of socio-political trauma, cultural narratives, and familial mental health. She is currently in the process of writing a memoir regarding her family's legacy as survivors of the Anfal campaign, otherwise known as the Kurdish genocide. Connie is a passionate advocate for the cultural competence in mental health, particularly in empowering the acceptance and understanding of mental health, neurodiversity, and disabilities within non-West cultures. One of Connie's greatest hopes is to see an end to the moralizing stigmas that result in the ostracization, discrimination, and devaluation of individuals. And last but not least, our previously introduced keynote speakers, Kim Williams and Dr. Aaron Schrader, will also be participating as panelists for this discussion. And so, welcome around. We have a powerhouse of thought and diverse amount of thought at this stage. So, we're gonna get started. Don't feel like you all have to answer every question, but if you feel so led, please do so. So our first question, so they're the lovely headshots. First question, what are some ways we can better communicate inclusion here at UT Dallas? Don't all speak at once. Yes, I will.
Well,
You're ready.
I don't work here at UT Dallas, but I want to say just having this conversation,
Yes.
having a summit that is focused around this, having panelists speak,
Yes.
and ensuring that your students and your staff and your faculty are aware of the resources. It's just incredible. So I want to just give you a pat on the back for what you're already doing right now.
So I'm not a student here at UTD, but I do have previously graduated from SMU with a Master of Dispute Resolution. And so one of the things that I've learned is having those conversations, but specifically having that support network. And as I think it was you that mentioned about who are your two people that could you reference. For me, I look at specifically who is your team of people. And it can be from different backgrounds, different departments, different individuals. You can have several mentors. So really having that safe space of mentors or individuals that you can refer to as creating those conversations. And sometimes those conversations are difficult. And so I think that is crucial, whether you're a student or you're a colleague or an employee, all of that is part of, and there is essentially your enablers to be successful during your time at UTD.
Thank you, Dylan. Connie, you have anything to add?
Yeah, actually I have a lot, but I'm going to say one thing as a student at UT, what I think is really important, and Dr. Schneider had mentioned it earlier, is making it okay to have mental health days. We have physical health days, we have excused absence, having COVID, having the flu, but we don't have it to be okay just 1 or 2 days out of the semester. Okay to stay home. Okay, I cannot get out of bed today, but the consequences are severe if I don't, because I'm going to miss lecture and my teacher not accommodating me by posting those recorded lectures, because I cannot, because they don't, because of the stigma, and they don't see mental health as something visible, oh, having a broken bone or being in the ER. But like, God forbid, if you cannot get those days, it can lead to you being in the ER because of suicide attempt or something else. So it's like important with university just to recognize it's okay for us to have like a couple, just 1 or 2 allotted mental health days in the semester or a year or whatever it is. So we need to help like implement change within by recognizing mental health is something, a bodily health is exactly like physical health. We have to recognize that.
Yeah, staff council, I think Matt is on that committee there, doing some research on that, so we're happy to hear that. Casey, go ahead.
I was going to also add in everything that we mentioned here today. Dr. Schrader and Kim did a really great job of kind of bringing this together. But as our culture changes in the workplace and on college campuses, our needs have changed and we're making it more apparent. And so flexibility and being willing to make changes and not just relying on this is how we've always done it, this is how I've always done it. I don't want to put energy into that. We have to move past that. We have to be willing to meet people where they are. If we are inviting people to and encouraging them to disclose a disability, we have to be able to receive it in a way that won't cause them to not want to say it again, or to be in an environment where they could but don't because of a past experience. I don't want to be that experience for anybody. So hopefully that can resonate throughout campus.
Go
I
ahead.
have one more thing to say, and it's also to make sure we have people with disabilities visible on campus, even if their disabilities are not, by putting these people in positions of power and authority, whether it's faculty, student leaders, administration. We have to make that change from within when people come on campus, not just disabilities, also having Black and Indigenous and people of color on there. So our population is so diverse at UTD, and I don't speak for all school, but like the BBS itself, I'm a psychological undergraduate. My faculty, and I love them all, but it's not as diverse as as we hope would be. And these are our researchers, these are our people. I was part of the CCF RU, and the whole point of it was putting a historical unrepresented population, student voices into research. And that's important. We have to make that change by placing these people who come from diverse backgrounds into these positions of power. Because that's the only way we can make change happen.
I would also like to add a couple things here to your point of disclosing. I'll just tell you, 10 years ago, and I was 21, 22 years old, I did not want to self-disclose. Part of that is because I did not have the educational awareness of being a sort of a self-advocate in that standpoint.
Right.
Now, 10 years later, 32 years old, I do self-disclose. Just so you guys know, I'm deaf and hard of hearing. I have spinal back neck fusions, and I have learning differences, specifically with a minor case of OCD, so I'm very obsessive and in organization and so forth. But I'm proud to say it because I have the educational awareness around disability. But I also think it's important that we standard of practice. What does SOP mean? Well, the idea is whether there's a person with a disability or not, make it a standard of practice that we're providing these options available to them. So that way they can feel comfortable at the right time that they want to disclose. Not everybody will disclose, but I think it's having a standard of practice to make sure that we're providing the needs and the tools and resources for students and colleagues and employees to be able to feel that they're safe, to be, whatever that might need are.
Excellent. Dr. Schrader or Siri, do you have anything to add before we move on?
I think one of the big things is, as everyone's
Let's pull the
mentioned,
mic up.
oh, sorry,
It's okay.
visibility, and also just sharing, making sure that everyone's aware of all the resources we have, all of the different programs we have, and making it very clear that we are a community that welcomes everyone, and that we value inclusivity and we value diversity.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next question. So I'm going to start with Dr. Schrader. So what are some examples of using bias-conscious language in the job posting?
I think there were a few things that came to mind for me. One, so not related to disability, but just thinking about like biased language in job postings, just thinking about like gender identity, like not using binary language, you know, in our job postings where it's just he, she in there, but using more inclusive language. But then as I was also thinking about it from a disability or access perspective, there are job postings that'll say things like, we're looking for someone with a lot of really, really high energy. We're looking for someone who's really ready to work really, really hard. And that really implies a lot of values around like productivity, and that one's value is connected to being super high energy, able to work really hard. And there's days that my energy is different. I don't know that I am less valuable as a worker, though. And so just thinking about language like that. Or even in job postings that say like must be able to sit for an extended period of time, must be able to sit for 8 hours. I mean, we can get a sit to stand desk. Like, is that really necessary? Or, you know, I was looking online for examples as well, and saw an example that said some postings will say like this job requires written reports, must be able to type up reports. Like, well, there's a lot of different adaptive technology we could use. Like, someone create a report, you could use voice software. So really thinking when we're doing job postings about like what is it that actually is necessary for this job, but there can be a lot of bias within the language that would mean that like disabled folks just may not apply at all. They feel like, oh, that's not something that would be accessible to me, or I wonder if I were to go through this process and work here, and then I would have to share like access needs related to that, how would that go?
I see wheels turning. Anybody else like to add? Dylan, go ahead.
Yeah, so as a founder of a transition support company focusing on employment for people with disabilities, I think the, broadening the definition of what, when I see standardized job applications or postings, it's basically, what they're looking for specifically. It's not necessarily, in some ways, it's physical in areas of the description. It's not necessarily broadening the horizon of different types of applicants and so forth. I think the biggest challenge here, I think, is the language is being more flexible, as you mentioned. We often think about accommodations, and to be honest with you, prior to the pandemic, it was all about accommodations. Now it's the culture of flexibility. And if we can have that same mindset when it comes to job postings, not only language, but also get a little bit more specific. Maybe in some areas be more lenient of widening the gap of population, so that way more people with disabilities or others might want to partake in that job posting.
Okay, awesome. Love it. I'm going to skip because I think we all are about inclusion for all students, staff, and faculty. Benefiting our classroom, but recently, to bring us back to right now, our Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion partnered with the Office of Institutional Compliance, Equity, and Title IX initiatives to encourage employees to voluntarily self-identify their disability status. What changes could we see over the next few years as a result of increased participation in voluntary self-identification? I'm going to start with Casey.
Trickery. But the first thing that comes to mind is I think that the more people who self-identify and report, the more we realize what work we need to do, and how are there common needs among our population that we could be doing, but we didn't realize were such a prevalent need. So I think if we pay attention and take note of some common flexibility that people are needing, or accommodations, whatever they may be, why wouldn't we implement them across campus? I also like to think of, as we make these changes, current policies that have existed, and this is not just an institutional level, I believe this about laws, corporate policies. Do our policies affect or try to police or keep in line people who are breaking rules, and then impacting the majority who now are limited in access? Or are we writing policies that provide more access that may cause someone to take advantage of a policy or whatnot on a lower amount? So how are we looking at how we're making policies moving forward and adjusting as we go? But I think the information that we receive from our population should be applied to our environment.
Dylan's on
Yeah,
fire.
so the benefit of, and I'll just say, I'm gonna, again, I'm not representative of UTD, but I'll share from personal experiences. You know, UTD is doing a phenomenal job in creating a culture that really embraces multiple departments, but also working with a wide range of employee resource groups, and they're focusing on ways to build collaboration. However, in long story, the whole application process of self-identification, you know, we often think, you know, hey, this is an opportunity to self-identify. We embrace the culture. You know, about 7 or 8 years ago, the office of which is OFCCP, the idea of wanting to have 7% of their federal and subcontractors to self-identify, but it was such a blanket statement. There was no meaning behind that statement. And so the challenge is when we disclose, you know, there's also challenges of actually being included in that process. So for example, in the last year, I've applied to over 100 applications, job postings over the DEI landscape, and I self-disclose every one of them. Well, guess what? 24 to 48 hours, that was rejected every time of self-disclosing. And I think that's a problem. I think there's a problem in how algorithms or because oftentimes when we're self-disclosing, there's a challenge that you may not necessarily get an opportunity to be viewed as or interested in the next phase of the process. And so the challenge here is I did the same thing for about 25 different job postings within the DEI landscape, and I did not self-disclose. Guess what? Of the 25, 10 of them I got interviewed. So keep in mind, there's a challenge here when it comes to self-disclosure, and I think it's important that no matter what department or what office or what university or what employer, any employer, we have to consider that any applicant that is qualified for the position, we shouldn't, and if they do disclose, we need to figure out how are we measuring that, and are we being equitable in our outreach? And if we do want people to disclose, we cannot turn them away simply based on a certain demographic, and of course, disability and disabled veterans or you know, of race and culture are all protected class.
Anyone else want to add something to that particular question? I'm going to take it back to the classroom. I know I skipped one, but I was going to follow the flow of employees. Now, do you think inclusion for all students, including those with disabilities, benefits everyone in the classroom? Why or why not? Now read it one more time.
Yep.
Do you think inclusion for all students, including those with disabilities, benefits everyone in the classroom? Why or why not?
Is that me, or you want to?
I'd rather hear from a student. Yeah.
Okay, I can say a lot about this because I'm registered with OSA, but being inclusive, and I'll read this here because I'm going to start going on a tangent, you probably don't want that, but being inclusive is including all students and not just the ones that have documented disability, because chances, there's a high percentage of students who have a disability and they may not want to disclose it, or there's students who may not even know they have a disability. I did not know I had a disability until I was thriving during COVID with online work because I was able to structure my coursework. I had flexibility. I wasn't in a lecture in front of a professor expected to pay attention for an hour when my mind was thinking of like 600 different things at once. We go here for hours and think of everything except when my professor was talking about electrons and I wasn't thinking of anything except everything else. So having an environment where I had control, I was able to stop and pause and have recorded lecture, everything, I found myself thriving. So when I came back to UT, I was a freshman last semester, and I came back and it was all in person. I was in front of a chem lecture, once again, in front row, and I could not pay attention. I was failing, I was tanking, I was not meeting that standard which I put myself ever since I was a kid, and it led to like my mental health going down. It led to like suicidal tendencies and everything, and I didn't think like I needed help because I never viewed it until I recognized what it felt like to get accommodations. I didn't know what it was like having a disability, 'cause I didn't know how to disability until I was able to have that flexibility and those accommodations through COVID. And so I think it benefits all students because they're all better met, because not everyone knows of the disability. And with this, like, there's a bunch of studies out there. It has shown, especially in children, I see this as a child development major, it helps to be inclusive of all kids and all, sorry. Okay, sorry.
It's okay, you're excited.
Yeah, I just could say stuff about this like forever. Like, it's really important because not everyone knows. Not everyone knows the needs. Some people don't even know the needs they need because they haven't been able to recognize it. They may come from a culture that doesn't even recognize like what mental health is, what mental illness is. I have severe like ADHD, and have general anxiety disorder. Like, I don't know. My parents refuse to acknowledge it. I don't know it exists. And it's like coming from that culture and those people who say it doesn't exist. Like coming to school where like I have QR codes talking about mental health everywhere, but like I understand it's there and I want to get to research, but how am I supposed to utilize it in a culture competent way for my family to understand? So having like inclusivity for all students helps, because not everyone can go out and say, oh, I have this and this, and go register with the office, because we may not have the support of our family. We may not even like support and validate and acknowledge ourselves that we had it. So yeah.
Thank you. Sarah, go ahead.
I can definitely add.
Let's use the mic.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I definitely agree, and having participated here at UT Dallas as a student and as an instructor, it's so clear that creating inclusivity and inclusive practices and working towards, increased accessibility benefits everyone. As you mentioned, it's not just students that don't necessarily know that they have a disability. It's also just that we have really diverse learners and really diverse experiences. And so if we can create a really accessible, equitable environment, there's just a higher possibility that we can have everyone flourish and create a system that works for everyone, no matter, whether they have a documented disability or not. I'm thinking recently in my classes, I teach online, and I've started using transcription on my videos, not just having the notes written, and I've gotten such good feedback on that, because some students just work better reading the transcript alongside watching the video, and I think it's like that with a lot of things.
I'd like to add something as well.
Go ahead.
As a student who went through the pandemic, both virtually and also in person, obviously they have its benefits. Every student has a different preference, and I think, again, before it was accommodating, we go to a specific office to ask for some additional accommodations and so forth, whereas now I think it has to be a two-way street. It's not just students doing it, it's also the instructors. And the instructors need to sort of, typically the very first meeting for the class of the fall or the spring semester, the idea is that they would let them know ahead of time, here is what I've laid out to provide a flexibility of ways that we can work together and make sure that you're included in whatever setting that might be. Zoom settings, typically a lot of people don't know is that in the disability community, certain disabilities or certain individuals don't want to have their screen on. Is for a protective reason. And so it's not necessarily, during my time at SMU, they require that all of us to be on the screen and show ourselves, but not everybody will be confident or have the awareness to want to do that yet. And so it's just all about comfort level and flexibility. But at the same time, we also have to consider is extra time. I think that's the simple thing that we're all going through, but in a hybrid setting. You're going to class in person, and then you're attending some virtual homework and so forth. Time is the essence, and everything is, it's hard to manage, especially a student. But I think knowing that the instructors know that, and they're aware of it, and they're providing clear communication on their syllabus or anything along those lines, and making those open dialogue. I think having that open dialogue throughout their time in class, through that semester, I think is very, very important.
Kim, you have something to add?
You know, I do. I think that, yes, inclusion for students is going to benefit everyone, but I want to take it a little bit broader. I think it's also in the community, and I really think it's in corporate America and in the business world. And so what I have found is the more times we have conversations around that, the more people are willing to disclose themselves or to say, maybe I need some support or some accommodations, or even, what can I do to support you?
So I know we are getting close to the end of our time. What I want to do is open the Q&A up to the audience. If you have any questions, and if you do not, we will go back to our questions that we have on our screen. There's a microphone in the middle of the auditorium, and we'll get this microphone. Michael, if you'll come help me real quick. We'll put a microphone down here on the floor. And if we need to bring it to you, we can do that as well, if you don't mind, Michael. Yes. Do we have any questions?
Right over there.
Feel free to turn it on. Give us your name and your question, if you don't mind.
Testing, hello. All right, thank you. Okay, first and foremost, thank you guys so much for being a part of, oh, sorry, can you hear me? Are we good? Okay. First and foremost, thank you all so much for being a part of this panel. I wrote down a couple questions, and I promise I'll only ask one. So, firstly, my name is Brielle Richardson, and I am a staff member here at UTD. I have come across people who I genuinely do believe they voiced concerns in terms of dealing with their own sort of mental health, but like you mentioned, the cultural competency surrounding that, they have no idea on how to approach their parents, especially, that still believe in that sort of antiquated mentality that mental health is unimportant. So how can I extend myself as a friend to them and maybe try and suggest some ways that they can approach that conversation with their parents?
Start with Dr. Schrader.
I think this will look different, like whether, I don't know if you're interacting with staff members or faculty or students, but I certainly know in working with, I guess with anyone, I think sometimes it can be helpful to get support like in a therapeutic space. I mean, I'm always going to plug the therapies, right? To plug counseling or group therapy spaces, but or even like our consultation spaces, consultation chats. That is absolutely a really, really common presenting question that students come into the counseling center with, like wondering, how do I talk to my parents about that? So even having like a consultation with a therapist can be really helpful to talk through, like, what is your goal in that conversation? What are you most hoping they would understand about you and would understand about mental health concerns, or what your day-to-day experience is like? What would you like to get out of that conversation? So I think any of us can ask that question, like, what are you hoping to get out of the conversation? What do you want them to understand about you better? But I think in a therapeutic space, there would be maybe more opportunity to even unpack, like, what are maybe reasonable goals related to that, and, you know, being able to provide some of the emotional support when sometimes folks are navigating some of the grief and loss that can come with sitting with the idea of, like, I don't know if that conversation is going to go as well as I wish it would go, or that we'll all leave with a shared beautiful understanding, you know, of what's happening. And that's why I'm also kind of plugging mental health services as well, just to be able to help folks on a journey kind of related to that. But I think it can be helpful to ask questions around, like, what would you most hope folks understand about you and your lived experience of this. And I think when I've asked that question, I've seen a lot of students, like, really start to think through, like, okay, this is what I want them to know, and I encourage folks to write stuff down. Because I think what I've often shared is we get into those conversations and feel nervous and scared and overwhelmed, and things just float out into space and time as they do when we're feeling nervous and anxious. And so I've encouraged a lot of folks to have your notes, put it in an email, write things down, gather your thoughts, make the conversation accessible to yourself. I may have gone on a tangent and lost sight of your question, but that's my thoughts for now.
No worries, thank you.
I've had the privilege in the last couple of years to moderate some conversations. So conversations around men, masculinity, and mental health. Mental health in the Black community, mental health in the Hispanic community. And here's what I have found, and this is why I'm so passionate about speaking out about mental health, is because I definitely agree with you, Dr. Schrader, that the therapeutic way is very good, right? I also have found, and this was personally in my own story, and then with other people, people's stories really speak to families. And if you have someone who is a Hispanic person who is having challenges disclosing their mental health or a disability with their family, if you know of another student who's Hispanic or family member that's gone through that, it's a lot easier, I think, coming peer-to-peer. I don't want to say a lot easier, but sometimes it is accepted a little bit more, is what I should say.
Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you.
So I'll just speak from my personal experience. Just so you know, I have a father who's Iranian and my mother who is Yugoslav. My aunt is Korean, and my stepmother is Guatemalan. And so I know the cultures very well just based on their personal experiences. And I know that that those cultures are very dominant in a sense of expectations and outcomes. And so knowing that UTD is a very prestigious school in Texas and has a very diverse population, I think one thing for sure is, for me personally, I always had the adaptability to connect with my mother than my father, because my father was very focused on the end goal. It was not necessarily the process to the end goal. And so stories is very, very impactful. And I think tying in with an experience and then sharing that to one parent or one family member who you can trust and connect with, I think is very, very important, and that's a good first step. Mental health, as somebody's mentioned earlier in this conversation, mental health is being more prevalent now than it was prior to the pandemic. And so I think it's easier to have that conversation. It's just a matter of the ability to confront it head on. And I always say, if we shy away from it and we're not confronting it, we're not being able to elaborate more on that. And I think it's the ability to let students know that find out one person within your family who you can trust and will listen, share a story, an experience that you're feeling. And then third is you just want them to simply have a conversation with you to create that further dialogue.
Thank
I'll just quickly add, along with that, is if in the event that someone doesn't have that one person that they can confide in, if they find a roadblock, if they don't feel the conversation has been successful, being that person that they came to ask advice on how to talk about mental health with their family, offering to still be there. After the conversation, if it goes well, doesn't go well, let's process it. I know some resources that can help, and keeping that level of hope there for them, that no matter how this conversation goes, there's still someone there that will support them.
And Connie.
Okay, I was hard to say about this. Okay, I say this as a student, I'm Kurdish, and if anyone knows anything about Kurdistan, we're the largest ethnic group in the world. We're stateless. There's about 50 to 80 million, so I can't speak for everyone, but I can speak for my family. There is no such thing as mental health. There is not just a stigma. There is no such thing as a psychiatric condition. You have anxiety, you have depression, you're not close, you're not praying your 5 prayers a day, you're not close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what it is. You're schizophrenic or you have panic disorder, you're possessed by a demon, you're possessed by a jinn. That is what they put. They put these supernatural causes, use religion to twist religion to give it, because mental health doesn't exist. So coming from a culture in where like I am not coming from a family where my diagnosis, my identity, like is not even validated. I don't know how to even say this, like validation is not everything, but it's important when it comes from your parents. And when they don't see as, oh, you're not taking enough walks, you're not close enough to God, you're not praying, all that kind of stuff, it makes mental health worse. And to be culturally competent is by understanding that some people come from cultures where mental health isn't a thing. It's not as easy to say, go and get this resource, get this, when you don't have, as I said earlier, that support system. Like oh God, I'm sorry, like I have so many things I want to say about this and I just can't say it all.
No,
my mind, I'm sorry.
You can finish after. You're okay. I'll ask you later.
Yes. So thank you, Bria, for your question.
Thank you.
We can take maybe one or two more questions.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
I want to, I really don't have a question. I just want to say thank you for your panel discussion. You guys really kind of answered my question when I came up. One thing I do want to share is that I think sometimes that we do forget that people, that we're thinking of mental illness as a separate from people with disabilities that are also challenged with that. We have a lot of individuals that were really impacted by the COVID that do have disabilities that are not related to mental health, but they ended up having mental health, and people really felt like it was their disability that was causing that. And so I just think we just need to keep a mindset that it's for everyone. It's not just individuals that have a diagnosis of mental health.
We can take one more question because I know we got a hard stop. Oh, good.
He has some, just wait.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah,
Okay.
no worries.
Am I waiting on you or you
No,
waiting
no,
on
you
me?
go ahead.
Okay.
You go ahead.
So I've found this several times, and I don't know that this is this is more of a curiosity question, but I've had this illness for 11 years now, and yay! And so I'll see questionnaires on. I'll be filling out doctor's forms, and just there's standard, hey, have you had your spleen out? Hey, if whatever else. And one of them is, are you depressed? And I want to put on there, not how you're asking, because 11 years, but they're asking something else. And the one time that I did put on there that I'm depressed, which not in the way that they're asking, he focused on it and just zoomed, and just was that's what he focused on. And it was just, it's like, no, and I don't put it on there anymore. And I'm curious as to if you all have insight as to how to answer that.
Great question.
Thank you.
So I want to it's something really short about this because I am 20 years old. I just turned 20 yesterday. I have no experience. I'm barely going.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I have been shadowing a child and adolescent psychiatrist for the past year and a half. And it's very hands-on. She teaches me, she quizzes me. She when a new patient comes in, she tells me, get out of the room. Okay, what did you think of it? And all that kind of stuff. And with that, a lot of providers, I'm a pre-med student, a lot of providers, they're not looking at patients holistically. Something Dr. T had told me about it as a psychiatrist herself, because it's its own stigma, an own thing about being a psychiatrist. You have to look at the patient from all sides. You cannot just focus in on one. A child, someone comes in with, someone comes in with depression, so you cannot automatically go to depressed or fatigued. They've been going on 4 days and have 4 days that haven't been getting out of bed. You gotta get a blood test. What if he has high, my fellow has leukemia comes out. You gotta look at them as a person and everything. You can't just focus on one thing like the doctor with depression. You gotta look at the fact you may have a disability and something else, and everything comes, because as humans we're not just cut, cloak, dry, we're not. And providers, there is some providers who are amazing, who are great, who advocate and look at you as a person, as a whole, and look at it holistically, but some don't. So it's just, as providers and physicians, they have to look at it and get more training to be more.
Okay, thanks.
I would like to add, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna add that, I'll just tell you, there's a little background on me is that I work almost 24 hours a day. And it is a stigma that I have that prevents me from engaging in certain activities. But I wanted to tell you, I go on many health checks. So every quarter I do a health check just because I need to make sure that everything around me is working. And so that question I see quite often. But I've noticed that many newer practices are not asking that specific question. And it just depends on, what that is. But typically is, some places they would say, are you experiencing a form of depression? Is some questions that would often say. But if I were to disclose that, I would typically not write that down, and I would typically let the doctor know directly in that kind of conversation, because typically the doctor would actually, in that room, in your consultation room, they would just review what you've said, and then this is how you would disclose it. There's a lot of things I don't disclose on paper just because I don't want the front desk office person, a manager, to see it. I don't want the nurse to see it. I just want the doctor to know directly. And so that is an opportunity. If you trust the doctor well enough, I think that might be a great avenue for you. But I think, again, you have to do what you're comfortable. What makes you feel safe and comfortable to be able to disclose. And not every question is effective. And I know that many practices today, especially new ones, are creating a more sensory approach, an awareness approach in how they're trying to encourage patients to fill out forms.
Thank you. Kim.
I think we have a long way to go as far as and I've been in healthcare for many, many years, so I say this with a little bit of background and knowledge. We have a long way to go with educating our healthcare professionals about mental health. And to your point, really and truly, I want to say about mental illness versus physical health or our mental health.
Yeah.
I think all of us have to manage our mental health. Every single one of us has to manage our mental health. And I would love, and I don't think this will happen in my lifetime, to where there is a, like I said, there's a doctor's visit where you can go and have an overall holistic checkup, to where the doctor is asking you not only physically, how are you doing, but mentally. And to that point, one step further, I'd love not to have to say, I'm going to take a mental health day versus I have the flu, but just that I'm going to take a day off because I'm not feeling well. Mm-hmm. And I think we have some opportunities in the world for that.
Okay. So we are at our time. Panelists, if you will stay seated for a second, we have some gifts for you. I'm going to slide them down to you if you can. And while I do that, if y'all give them a round of applause. They have some valuable wealth of experiences, knowledge, expertise, and we want to thank them for that. So we have some small tokens of appreciation to you all. And then I'm going to thank our sponsors. I think you all are going to get together for a photo op after.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. And so before we end, I'd like to thank all of our partners, vendors, sponsors who made this Diversability Summit possible. Those partners are the Universal Access ERG with Rupa Vinay, and hold your applause to the end, if you don't mind. The Accessibility Resource Center with Carrie Tate, the Graduate Student Assembly with Siri Wilder and Megha Hooley, the Student Counseling Center with Dr. Aaron Schrader, the Student Wellness Center with Casey Siebenecker, the Student Diversity Advisory Council with Connie Merzer, and the City of Richardson with Mayor Paul Kroger. I'd also like to give some thanks to our vendors who participated. So give them a round of applause. I'd also like to give some thanks to our vendors who participated in the resource fair. The Student Diversity Advisory Council, the Accessibility Resource Center, the Center for Student Recovery, the Student Wellness Center, Employee Benefits, United Rocks, Universal Access ERG, the Graduate Student Assembly, Deer Oaks, Segway Center, Spectra Therapies and Evaluations, Life Path Systems, and the National Alliance on Mental Health, North Texas. And finally, last but not least, I'd like to thank the rest of our program participants, Dr. Pearson, Dr. Hartman, Mr. Velker, Kim Williams, Dr. Schrader, Casey Siebenberger, Sue Wilder, Dylan Rafferty, and Connie Murphy. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Lunch boxes will be provided to go after we end. So have a wonderful day. Go out, love, honor, and respect one another, and look out and be inclusive of all of our students, staff, and faculty. So have a wonderful day.
Yeah, thank you.
And